Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Tom School of Life weekly update. I'm your community director, Kevin Dolan, joined here by facilitators Jeremy Evans, David Moore, and Barbara Williams. Got my camera off today for some technical issues. We wanted to talk today about entrepreneurship as preparedness. I think it's very often characterized as something that you do when everything is good and something that you do when you've got everything squared away and you've got so much runway and what am I going to do? Well, I guess I'll start a business. And I think that's just that doesn't match my experience as an entrepreneur or almost any entrepreneur that I know. Virtually all of us build the plane in flight, and it is actually possible to endure financial hard times. We're talking about kind of the way things are headed. They're predicting a recession later this year. How bad that might be, progress of de-dollarization around the world, and sort of what the consequence of that'll be. But I wanted to open with David. David, you started your business in the thick of the recession in 08, 09, right?
Yes, that's right. Started my business in 08 and quite frankly, didn't really pay close attention. I mean, I knew the financial crisis was happening, but I basically chose to just focus on building a business at that time. And a lot of the conversation around housing prices and things like that, I just sort of opted out of that conversation and chose to just build a business. And I think a little bit of what entrepreneurship is preparedness, but it's also it is a form of, in the early days, at least, it's a form of suffering. It's a form of cutting back and making do and being resourceful. And I think when the world around you is sort of choosing their suffering, when maybe they're going to choose to worry and watch the news, or they're going to choose to cut back and be fearful, you can kind of you're going to suffer as well. But what you're going to suffer with is you're going to put yourself through the paces of trying different things, starting a business, right? So it's a great time to sort of match the energy of the world in terms of we're all doing something difficult, but maybe your something difficult has this huge upside on the back end. So I sold a car when I started my business. I liquidated my savings when I started a business. I did a lot of things that a lot of people were doing, but I had this huge sort of secret mission behind all of it. So cut back and go to bare bones with your neighbors, but do it with a different mission in mind. And I think that's probably the message that I would bring forth from that time period of my life.
Did you do any planning before you left your job to start it? Like, did you start anything before you left your job, basically, whether it was training or learning what you needed to do?
I knew about the business category that I was going into, but I essentially it was more network. It was just knowing the right people, the people that I wanted to bring with me, the people that I wanted to work with again. And I think, if there was any planning, it was probably just trying to think about how about runway, how long I could live on my funds, how low I could go, how lean I could get, and how fast I could. The thought was really, how fast can I get profitable, or how fast can I get my bills paid? And so that for me was kind of the metric, is just getting through a period of months, getting through a period of time. And certainly there were motivators that came, as they do. There's so many surprises that come when you're starting a business. One, you might have I had a daughter that was on the way, so that enormously ramped up my energy to make things work. And then there were other ups and downs that appeared in the first year that served as sources of motivation and sources of great serendipity. Jeremy, what about your experience? Did you do some work in that period as well, the 08, 09?
I think I was an undergrad. It took me maybe 3 years after graduating. I was working. I did pre-med. I was working at ER. I started toying with a business. It probably would have been a good business, which was a self-entry database for supplements. First time I built an open source project. It was a media wiki or Wikimedia, whatever it is. It's just the Wikipedia engine. I did that at work. Zero cost, zero capital. Very cool. I had no idea how to get anyone to adopt it or to use it in any meaningful way, but it was a significant growth experience. In my very first business, I capitalized with 0 APR credit cards. And it was not a good idea because it was very capital intensive. It was a manufacturing business. It was a consumer product. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad idea for everybody. But if somebody says, I have no time, I have no capital, the combination makes it tough, right? But you should be aware. So most people want to start a B2C business on the premise that they're consumers and they know market gaps in the consumer market. B2B oftentimes is services, and services are usually a no capital or low capital business. That's phenomenal. That's a really, really great way to get started. So if you know your job and you can offer consulting without violating some kind of non-compete, you can get started with that right away. And that's on the other hand, if you are in love with an idea and you have time and money in some ratio, then absolutely you can start a manufacturing business and do a factory run and fill your house with 1,000 iterations of this product and then ship it on Amazon. And I mean that sincerely. That does work. But you rarely are people aware of the risks and liabilities. And you have to kind of evaluate that liability profile yourself. After I ran out of all my money because I had no idea how to sell my freeze-dried kombucha, then I had to start a 0 capital business because I had no money. And sometimes you're backed into a corner like that. And I quite literally taught myself how to do web development, web design, and just started rolling with it, started freelancing more or less. And then over time that morphed into hiring overseas, working with other people. And in that sense, it's both a little bit of management, a little bit of arbitrage, right? So I can close a deal and then I can send it overseas and these guys get it 60, 70% of what I want. And I put those polishing touches on, et cetera. But what I want to add here is dinosaurs and mice. And I mention this all the time on my calls. The advantage you have as an entrepreneur is you are a mouse. And if the asteroid comes and volcanic ash or whatever happened there, probably conspiracy, doubtlessly conspiracy, never happened. If that comes about, you have a hole to hide in and you're nimble and you can move and you can eat little scraps. You don't need $100 million contracts to start a business. The advantage of the entrepreneur is this mobility to refine the value offering. And if you have very little experience, you need to be able to adapt. You really can't get strong market data without going to market. So that's my liability risk profile for the people that I love and talk to each week. But they may have different ideas, and that's also fine.
I like the. Go ahead, Kevin.
No, you, David.
One of the things that I like that we do in the school is we focus on a lot of the business models that are can be started by anyone. They're easily replicable. They're often often taught in mass, right? Online communities, email newsletters, podcasts, a lot of the things that you find people wanting. But then a lot of times we'll have, business experiences like mine, starting a pharmacy, starting a specialty pharmacy that are not as easily replicated. And so I think it's important that you kind of, when you're studying business, you should both study the easily replicated business models, but you should also look into business biographies, because there's a lot of non-replicatable things that take place in the course of starting a business that are a little bit magic. And I think one of the reasons a lot of people are reluctant to share their business story is that they just don't find that people can really replicate it. But getting to know each other the way that we do in the School of Life, you can take some of the concepts that are broadly accessible, like online groups or podcasts or all the different things that we see, ChatGPT, things that are accessible to all, and model and mold those into the things that are quite proprietary. Maybe what you do at your current job or what your company does that's very unique and different, and you can't imagine how it could ever translate to entrepreneurship. I think that is the synthesis that we're trying to encourage people to do. Something that is completely, how would I ever do this outside of here? And Jeremy, you mentioned consulting. I think consulting is probably one of the fastest ways that somebody can take their day job and morph it into a entrepreneurial or at least a standalone income setting.
I know in the defense industry, I met all kinds of guys who essentially took their internal knowledge of the inner workings of the big behemoth that they worked at, and they would go take it to subcontractors or vendors or suppliers, or just there's a whole ecosystem that serves these giant corporations. And, obviously don't violate an NDA, don't violate a non-compete, but like there's like Sherpa knowledge that you have of how things get done and who you need to talk to, that these smaller companies want and will pay for. And like that's probably somebody who's like buried deep in the belly of the machine. That's where I would steer them, is toward that kind of a consulting relationship. Look for the smaller players in your ecosystem and see what value you can contribute to what they're doing. And I think also just in general, this point about being a dinosaur versus being a mouse, I can't remember. I've probably made this point before on the podcast, so if I have, we'll cut it out. But the worst sector in the economy in 2009, the one that got hit the hardest was construction management, and they got hit for 3.5%. So, if the pie in 08 was 100 and the pie in 09 was 96.5, that's really, really bad if you're a giant corporation that has growth forecasts that depend on 3% growth, and now you're at 3.5% decline. But it's really not bad if you're new in the game and you are building your capital requirements, you're building your forecasting, you're signing up, you're taking on whatever debt or equity relationships you're taking on with the current economic conditions baked in. So like, besides which, you have this enormous army of people who are underutilized because the economy sucks, and who you can get for cheap. And you obviously on the micro level, that means that right now, if you need a software team, there's lots of really, really bright guys who've just been caught up in the tech apocalypse and laid off and need something to do. And a lot of those guys actually have enough runway that you can, get them on an equity basis and build something together, versus having to get their groceries paid. But at the macro level, I mean, the biggest companies that the biggest like new guys in 09 were companies that took advantage of that labor situation at scale. So like Uber and Airbnb and Lyft and basically they saw all these people with all this time on their hands and said, how can we help these people make a little bit of money?
I didn't know when Kevin Kelly wrote his article of 1,000 True Fans, but I wouldn't be surprised if it came out around the time that 08, 09, because people were looking at these macroeconomic challenges and saying, oh, I can't start a business. It's like, no, you can't start a fleet of rental cars that support international business travel. But can you find 1,000 people who like what you do, or within your own industry, maybe 30 people that you can consult for or bring into a team of consultants and poach people, some great talent that have come newly available onto the scene. Being obsessed with macroeconomics when you are looking to do something for yourself or to even earn a 6 or 7 figure income is really kind of do it for entertainment and for gratification. But other than that, the Wall Street Journal is mostly for entertainment.
It's like a farmer thinking about like meteorology and the climate. Like, it's either going to rain or it's not. Like, there's not a whole lot you can do, and like sweating that does not. All it can really do is like discourage you.
Yeah.
And I looked it up. March 4, 2008. So right on the money.
Ooh. Low cost services, B2B and B2C, are favored in a recession. And so as the corporate services get disrupted, which are usually at higher costs, smaller players can emerge as dominant. So it's not merely just a gap in labor specifically, even though that is definitely a big factor. If you can do a good thing for cheaper than going to the big box person. And that could very well be a big consulting company or a big marketing agency. You will thrive. So, I mean, this is actually fairly conventional, well-known knowledge. Is there are many kinds of businesses that do best in a recession. The competition tends to be lower, and the big players are most disrupted. And if you're hearing that for the first time, we may or may not get to proving that over the next few minutes here, but it's an important factor to keep in mind. It's a certainty that will get you personally through long times. And it's also a strong viability indicator for certain business models. Very, very briefly, my life transformed forever when I realized I had a very clear mechanism to go to market and to sell websites. And for me, that was just UpWork. And I'm always endorsing UpWork to my folks. Is just go and do the thing. And you can do it on UpWork. You spend 2 hours applying the jobs and you get a job, and then you do the job and you make money. And once I got that formula, which by the way, took me years, I was doing everything from networking to like posting on forums. I knew nothing. It was just the evolution of marketing from web development, right? I had to figure out how to market myself. But once you have a rinse and repeat formula, you're better off than most people who are dependent on the W-2.
It's the story that I think it's Taleb. Nassim Taleb tells a story about like how the accountant versus the taxi driver. Okay, David's picking it up. The accountant, his maybe average day is less stressful than the taxi drivers, because the taxi driver has to make money actively. But the taxi driver will never have as bad of a day as the accountant can have, because the accountant, the worst day an accountant can have is he gets fired and his income goes to zero and his benefits go to zero and everything is gone. But a taxi driver, their worst day is they don't get any fares. And, then it's like being a mouse. It's being nimble. It's okay. So where are the fares? Like what has to change? What can I update to? And you can't be that flexible internal to a corporate environment. And these fake email jobs, I think everybody can feel that the clock's ticking on those. That is not an eternal fact of the universe, that people will be paid to do essentially nothing all day long. And it seems to me that when that renegotiation occurs, you can either be positioned to offer those services independently, like Jeremy's talking about, and actually, reap some benefit, or you can be the one whose relationship is being negotiated and who has kind of no idea what to do with themselves. And I think, and now is the time. Now is the time to work on it. Now is the time to figure it out. Figure out what your actual value is. Figure out how you can provide it to other people. I think most of us we're just going to have to figure out what our value is and how to sell it. I don't think it's optional. I don't think it's a luxury. So, it's a great place to stop on a dour, scary note. But Jeremy's got a hard stop, so we'll cut it there. But it's really good to get you guys' thoughts, and I appreciate you guys being here. So we'll see you guys next week.